Welcome to Dallas and welcome to Israel Under Fire. I'm Eric Stakelbeck, and it is day 25 of Israel's war against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Here is the state of play right now. Israeli forces say they are at the gates of Gaza City, which is the main stronghold of the Hamas terror group. And the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces so far, folks, have paid a heavy price. At least 11 Israeli soldiers have been killed so far in this operation, which has really broadened over the past several days. Of course, Israel, in the immediate aftermath of that Hamas massacre perpetrated on October 7th, the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust, Israel responded immediately with major airstrikes throughout Gaza, weakening the Hamas terror infrastructure in the Strip. And now Israel has followed up with a ground invasion, air, land, and sea forces striking Hamas in Gaza. And folks, remember, Hamas has this elaborate underground tunnel network. It's called the Metro, where Hamas's leadership, thousands of fighters have burrowed themselves in, and they're taking shelter from the storm above. But the Israel Defense Forces are now going into those tunnels to root out Hamas terror once and for all. And as I mentioned a minute ago, this is fierce and bloody and deadly fighting. It's going to last for a while for Israel to accomplish its stated goal. Whether it's Israeli political leaders, military leaders, they have made very clear that the ultimate goal here is the complete and utter destruction of the demonic death cult known as Hamas, so that these modern-day Nazis, just wearing different uniforms, will never, ever threaten the world's one and only Jewish state again. So keep the IDF right now, the people of Israel, the Israel Defense Forces, those brave soldiers in your prayers, folks. Look, I have good friends right now on the front lines entering Gaza. I'm thinking about them, praying for them around the clock. So join me and our entire team at TBN in that. We've seen our good friend Yair, who works for us in TBN's Jerusalem studio. You've seen his regular updates here every single day. Think of Yair, pray for him as well. But moving on to the larger state of play. Look, we've talked many times here on Under Fire over the past few weeks about this potentially becoming a multi-front war. Here is the update there. Number one, on the northern front. And remember, Iran has this ring of fire that surrounds Israel on all sides, whether it's Hamas or Islamic Jihad in Gaza, Hezbollah in southern Lebanon to the north. We've got these Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. And further south, we've got the Houthis in Yemen. More on them in a second. But up north is the main front that we're all watching. What is the deal with Hezbollah? Well, these engagements between the IDF and Hezbollah terrorists along the Israel-Lebanon border continue. And we've had close to 50 Hezbollah terrorists killed in battles with the IDF over the past few weeks. Also, at least 7 Israeli soldiers have lost their lives. So in many ways, folks, you could say that the second front has already opened. Yes, it hasn't been a full-on Hezbollah onslaught, but all of us right now are closely watching what's happening in southern Lebanon. In the meantime, I mentioned the Houthis in Yemen. Funny name, I know, but it's a name that you need to remember. This is another, surprise, surprise, Iran-backed terror proxy group. Now, Yemen is some 1,000 miles south of Israel, quite a distance, but thanks to Iranian supplies and armaments, the Houthi rebels are able to reach Israel. And over the past few days, they have fired rockets, missiles, and attack drones in the direction of the Jewish state. Now, thankfully, a U.S. destroyer stationed in the Red Sea shot down some, and Israel also has intercepted these projectiles coming from Yemen. But it's clear, we're talking, look, the northern front, the Gaza front, but it's also clear that the deep southern front in Yemen is also a growing concern for Israel. And then we have the homeland, and I'm talking about the U.S. homeland, where I'm coming to you from right now. We like to say here on Under Fire that what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. And if you needed any more clear indication of that, folks, testimony yesterday by the FBI Director Christopher Wray brought that home very starkly. Here's what he said about the possibility of Hamas attacks right here in the United States. Take a look.
We also cannot and do not discount the possibility that Hamas or another foreign terrorist organization may exploit the current conflict to conduct attacks here on our own soil. But it's not just Hamas. As the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, the Iranians, for instance, have directly or by hiring criminals mounted assassination attempts against dissidents and high-ranking current and former U.S. government officials, including right here on American soil. And along those lines, Hezbollah, Iran's primary strategic partner, has a history of seeding operatives and infrastructure, obtaining money and weapons, and spying in this country.
Folks, events unfolding right now in the Middle East eventually will profoundly affect all of us, no matter where we live. And that's why we're so glad right now to be joined by my good friend, Middle East expert, geopolitical expert, joining us from Israel. Our good friend Avi Melamed is here. Avi, always great to see you, my friend, and to get your insights on the state of play in the world's most volatile and chaotic region. We've got a lot to unpack, my friend, but first I want to ask you about Yemen, a place maybe a lot of our viewers don't know a bunch about, but Avi, in recent days, the Houthi rebels, the Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, have been quite active against Israel. What are they up to, and what is Israel's potential response against the Houthis?
Eric, hi, shalom from Israel. Wonderful to see you again together. I'm very thankful and honored. Very significant, Eric. You mentioned the Houthis. Very shortly, the Houthis are a congregation of Shiite tribes in mostly northern part of Yemen. They are about 35% of the population. In 2014, the Houthis launched a military coup in Yemen, ousting the legitimate Yemenite government. And as you very accurately mentioned, they are massively supported by the Iranians. Now, you made a very interesting and significant notion, basically saying, look, Yemen is about 1,000 miles away from Israel. What's the Houthis' story? The common denominator, the answer is, of course, the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime has established this array of armies of terror across the Middle East. One of them is the Houthis in Yemen. They are massively armed by the Iranians, missiles, drones, advanced military capacities. Today, as the Iranian regime is trying to apply a tactic of trying to deter Israel from totally destroying Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip, yet not involving their major proxy, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, with the war, the Iranian regime ordered the Houthis to basically move ahead and launch those attacks on Israel. And as you accurately mentioned, Eric, earlier, the Houthis have been firing some ballistic missiles at Israel, attacking drone and rockets, and they have been all intercepted by Israel and the United States of America very successfully thus far. In fact, one of the recent missiles launched by the Houthis landed actually in Jordan. So it's just another manifestation of this enormous threat that the Iranian array of proxies, armies of terror scattered across the Middle East are presenting not only to the state of Israel, but to the region and beyond the region, to the world entirely. And I must say, you know, Eric, I know you for many years, and I think that you are one of the few media people in the United States of America that was accurately identifying the threat the Iranian regime presents, not only to Israel, but also for the United States of America. And you have been talking about it for many years.
Avi, thank you so much, my friend. And many times on camera, I've been talking about it with you. You are one of the world's top Middle East experts, my friend. So it's always great to have you with us. And hey, as we're talking about this southern front in Yemen, the IDF, I would think right now, doesn't want to be fighting on multiple fronts if it can avoid it. But we've got to talk about the northern front, a place you and I have spent time together along the Lebanon border. Hezbollah seems to be taking some pretty heavy losses in these engagements with the Israel Defense Forces. How likely is it that the northern front develops into something much larger in the days and weeks to come?
Yes, Eric, this is one of the most significant questions. You know, I have been saying from day one to this war that I've noticed that there is an Iranian dilemma regarding the question, should they order the Hezbollah to move into the war full steam ahead, or should they just kind of like keep Hezbollah out of the fight? And in that context, up until now, it's very clear that the Hezbollah, the bottom line, as of now, is out of the war. Now, there are some very interesting aspects in that regard that we should emphasize. One, the fact that the Hezbollah is, as of now, out of the war enormously aggravates Hamas leaders who don't conceal their anger, because one of the major slogans that Hamas was marketing to its people, the Palestinian, was that when the time comes and there is a war with Israel, Hezbollah will join in full capacities. It didn't happen so far, and this is one thing that we should be aware of. That understanding explains something that I'm going to share with you, Eric, and your viewers. It's most recently updated. It's very interesting. Hezbollah published a list or statistics, apparently, trying to portray what he has been doing since day one of this war, targeting allegedly Israeli military targets. And here is something very interesting that the Hezbollah is doing in this statistics list, which is very interesting. He is inflating the statistics. Why is it so interesting? Because Hezbollah, up until now, relatively speaking, used to be very reliable with its reports. He is inflating the statistic because it's clearly one of the ways of the Hezbollah to try and to kind of like calm or address the mounting criticism by Hamas leaders who are aggravated by the fact Hezbollah has not joined the war yet. And then there is another interesting inside things that I want to share with you, which is not less known in the world. I want to share it with you right now. You know, everyone is talking about the upcoming speech of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah that is supposed to take place this coming Friday. I want to share with you something that is coming from my sources in Lebanon, which is a very interesting story, and it's very interesting to understand. Recently, in areas that are affiliated with Hezbollah, like the Dahya, the southern part of Beirut, which you are familiar with this whole story, the center, the power center of Hezbollah, and in other places in Lebanon, the number 313 appeared. Now, this is a very interesting story because you may wonder, what does it mean, the number 313, and what does it have to do with Hezbollah's upcoming leader speech? Just to understand the nature of the challenge that we are facing right now when we are talking about Hezbollah and the Shiites-backed Iranian militias. 313 is a very significant number in the story of the Shiite narratives. This is the number of allegedly the militants, the fighters, who were basically fighting 1,400 years ago in the battle to take revenge of the blood of Hussein ben Ali, the major martyr of the Shiites. And Shiites in Lebanon, right now, as we are heading towards Hezbollah's leader's speech on Friday, they are echoing the story of 313. And one of the reasons, Eric, they are doing that is because notice the date of this speech. It's going to be November 3rd, 2023.
Wow.
This is what we are dealing with.
Yeah. An apocalyptic ideology and apocalyptic worldview, Avi. It's clearly not only with
You got it right.
Yeah, not only with
You
Hezbollah.
got it totally right.
Yeah, it's apocalyptic, no doubt. And not only for Hezbollah, but the Iranian regime. Last question, Avi. We've got about a minute left before we let you go. You and I have spent time further to the south with another apocalyptic-minded Iran-backed terror group, Hamas. We've been along the Gaza border together, including in Nakalos, one of the great communities in southern Israel that was rampaged by Hamas. Your quick take, Israel, will it accomplish its goal of decisively crushing Hamas eventually? I know it's going to be a very tough fight.
It is very tough fight. It is a war, Eric. We are paying heavy price. Israel is determined to wipe out Hamas rule in Gaza Strip. This is the interest of Israel. This is the interest of the region. This is the interest of the free world. If we want to have any chance for stability and progress in the Middle East and prospect, we have to take down military capacities, Hamas military capacity. We must make sure that Hamas and Islamic Jihad will not be any longer a relevant player in the story of the Middle East.
Absolutely. Avi, you said it. You're right on target. If Hamas and Islamic Jihad live to fight another day, it sends the absolute wrong message to the Iranian regime and Hezbollah and Israel's other enemies. Avi, so great to have you, my friend. Thanks for keeping an eye on this for us, and we'll have you get back again very soon. God bless. Avi Melamed, we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Eric. Take care. Bye-bye. Shalom from Israel.
Thank you, Avi. Shalom, shalom. And folks, look, perilous times as Avi laid out, but I'm encouraged, and he laid out as well, it's encouraging to me to know that Israel is steadfast in the larger goal of destroying, and the necessary goal of destroying Hamas. Again, I'll use the word demonic. There's no other way to describe what Hamas perpetrated on October 7th. If you have any other doubt about what Hamas is all about, take a look at this clip from our good friends at MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute. They captured a top Hamas leader and his comments on October 7th and his fervent desire to create many more October 7ths. Take a look.
إسرائيل دولة لا مقام لها على أرضنا. إحنا الدولة لابد أن نزيلها لأنه بالفعل هي تعتبر كارثة أمنية وعسكرية وسياسية للأمة العربية والإسلامية، يجب أن تنتهي. لذلك احنا لا نخجل من نقول ذلك بكل قوة، إنه إسرائيل لازم نأدبها، وحنأدبها مرة ثانية وثالثة، ومش هذا حتكون طوفان الأقصى أول مرة، لا حتكون ثانية وثالثة ورابعة، لأنه احنا لدينا إصرار ولدينا قرار ولدينا إمكانيات أن نقاتل نعم. وأن نحارب، لكن كما قلت لك بدنا ندفع ثمن. نعم احنا مستعدين، معلش بدي أقول لك بشكل واضح، احنا اسمنا شعب الشهداء وبنفخر أن نقدم شهداء، احنا لا نريد أن نمس لا بالمدنيين ولا أن نلحق الأذى بهم، لكن أوقات لأنه في تعقيدات في الميدان صارت في منطقة موجودة، وكان هناك في احتفال وكان في سكان وفي منطقة واسعة ليست سهلة على امتداد تقريبا 40 كيلومتر. يجب أن ننتهي.
أن ينتهي وين؟
بس
بقطاع غزة؟
ينتهي إلى لا بتكلم عنه كل الأراضي الفلسطينية.
كل الأراضي الفلسطينية يعني زوال طبعا. إسرائيل؟
طبعا. وجود إسرائيل غير منطقي. وجود إسرائيل هو اللي بخلق كل هذه الآلام والعذابات والدموع والدماء، هي إسرائيل مش احنا ضحيه الاحتلال، نقطه واخر السطر. لذلك ما حدا يلومنا، احنا شو اللي بنعمله في 7 اكتوبر، في 10 اكتوبر، في مليون اكتوبر، احنا اللي بنعمله مبرر. It is justified، مبرره.
Folks, the two parts of that tirade that jump out at me the most are in addition to the fact that he clearly says we want to duplicate what we did on October 7th when we massacred 1,400 people, mostly civilians and predominantly men, women, children, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, and oh, by the way, dragged over 200 back to the bowels of hell in the tunnels beneath Gaza. But the other two things that jumped out at me about that were, number one, he said that Israel is occupying Gaza. I'm sorry, forgive me, but Israel pulled out of Gaza completely, the disengagement. Back in 2005, there have been no Israelis in Gaza in nearly 19 years. So that clearly jumps out at me. And number two, he says, look, we didn't want to harm civilians, but there were some complications on the ground. Yeah, complications like, I don't know, burning toddlers alive. And I hate to be so graphic, folks, but let's call it for what it is. This is what Hamas did, burning children, toddlers, families alive as parents watch their children, toddlers, be slaughtered before their eyes by Hamas. But don't worry, those were just complications on the ground. Now, this was pure savagery perpetrated by Hamas, and yet we have the Hamas apologist choir, I guess you would say, including right here in the West. Now, of course, Jordan, not a Western nation, of course, but has diplomatic relations with Israel, recalled its ambassador from Israel today to protest so-called Israeli war crimes. We have Bolivia, other Latin American hard left regimes cutting ties with Israel as well. But what about New York City? What about Chicago, London, Paris, Germany? We've seen these massive pro-Hamas, anti-Israel, rabidly anti-Semitic rallies. And then there's Toronto, Canada as well, where we had some very interesting comments by a protester this past week. Take a look.
We're here to demand an immediate ceasefire, to demand an end to both U.S. and Canadian funding and support of Israel's genocide, and also to call on Canadian people to join us, to take a stand, to lift Israel's 17-year-long siege on Gaza, whereby Israel controls Gaza's air, land, and water.
We're joined now by the director for the Center of Middle East and International Law at George Mason University, Eugene Kontrovich. Eugene, great to see you, man. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while because when it comes to these accusations of Israel perpetrating war crimes and being an occupier, etc., there's no one better than you in refuting those claims. Number one, this young lady in Toronto, anti-Israel demonstrator, accused Israel of war crimes, and we're hearing that charge more and more. Could you lay out for our viewers how Israel is perhaps the most humane fighting force, I would argue, in human history?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's great to be talking to you. And I have to say, despite the horrible massacre, the atrocious attempted genocide that Hamas perpetrated, Israel has reacted with what I could only describe as restraint. And I would just ask your viewers to think, if something on the order of 5 9/11s in one day, along with the horrible brutality, people tortured to death, happened in America, what would the United States do? I can tell you what Israel is doing. Israel is abiding purely by the laws of war. And the laws of war say you can only attack targets with military value, military targets. But when you attack those targets, one of the tragedies of war is that it is possible that civilians may get hurt. And civilian casualties, if they're not the goal of the attack, if they're incidental to the attack, are permissible. Indeed, nobody has ever fought a war without civilian casualties. When the United States fought to remove ISIS from Syria, there were maybe 10,000 casualties in that campaign. And again, that was not a threat right next door that had just invaded the United States. So Israel only targets military targets. But Hamas specifically locates, like in the footage you're seeing now, it specifically locates its military targets, not on a base, not separate from the civilian population, but amidst and even underneath the civilian population. Now, under the international law of war, that is a war crime. That is failing to observe what is called the requirement of distinction. But simply because Hamas hides amongst civilian population does not immunize them from attack. That would encourage terror groups to hide amongst civilians. When Hamas puts tunnels, for example, underneath hospitals, underneath city blocks, those tunnels remain valid military targets, and the moral culpability for those civilian casualties lies fully on Hamas.
That's a great point, Eugene. Look, as you mentioned, Hamas is willfully using civilians as human shields, and yet we hear calls for Israel continuously to preserve, obviously, civilian lives in Gaza. The world seems to be laying responsibility for the civilians of Gaza at the feet of the Israel Defense Forces, but who is ultimately responsible for the civilians in Gaza right now?
Hamas is responsible for the civilian of Gaza because they are the government. They have chosen to create a political entity in the 17 years since Israel left, where all the fuel, all the resources goes to their genocidal terror tunnel network. I think a simple illustration of the difference between Israel and Gaza is in Israel, underneath all the hospitals is where they put the neonatal units, the surgery units, the special underground bunkers for those procedures for vulnerable people, so they can be safe when Hamas shoots rockets at the hospitals. Underneath a Hamas hospital, a Gazan hospital, is a Hamas bunker for Hamas terrorists to get Israel to target those hospitals. And I would say that when Hamas puts a bunker under a hospital, when it puts its headquarters under a hospital, which it is doing, those hospitals become legitimate military targets. Now, Israel has refrained from attacking those so far, in part because of international pressure. But there are things which Israel could be doing, which it's unfortunately, I think, not doing because both of foreign pressure and even pressure by internal bureaucratic forces and government lawyers who are afraid of some of the international repercussions.
Yeah, it's almost like Israel at times, Eugene, is fighting with one hand tied behind its back, sadly. Hey, you're a renowned expert on international law. We've got about a minute left, and we will have you back to break this down more, Eugene. But quick question, what do you make, and you deal with this all the time head on, what do you make of the world's obsession with Israel? I mean, an anti-Israel obsession, I should say, and the so-called legal basis for it.
So there's absolutely no legal basis for it. International law is completely inverted when it comes to Israel. That is to say, the standards that are used for Israel are simply not the standards used for other Western countries. We know that America in Iraq attacked hospitals. In Afghanistan, there was bombing of hospitals. America blew up terror tunnels even when they were under civilian areas. That's what international law allows. Instead, there's a law made simply for the Jewish state, and that's not international, and it's not law. It is an attempt to prevent the Jewish state from defending itself from genocide.
Yeah, Israel held to impossible standards, Eugene, and you do such a great job of refuting these lies and the charges against the world's one and only Jewish state. Eugene Kontrovich, thanks so much. We will see you again soon. Thanks for your insights.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Folks, that is a very, very important point, and several points made by Eugene refuting this. We have, obviously, the military sphere of Israel's war and battles right now, but the war of ideas, the ideological war is being waged right now as well, and Israel needs ammo there, too, in the intellectual realm, and Eugene supplies that big time. Hey, final thoughts here. Look, the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 2 says, a day is coming when all nations will be gathered to Jerusalem and they will be judged on essentially how they treated Israel. So in God's economy, in his prophetic plan, Israel is a very, very big deal. So we're looking and we're watching and we're waiting and we're watching very closely at everything unfolding in the world's one and only Jewish state, in the Holy Land, the land where God Almighty has written his name forever. Stay in prayer. It works. Thanks for joining us here on Israel Under Fire. Until next time, God bless you. We'll see you again soon. Welcome to Israel Under Fire. I'm Eric Stakelbeck, and it is hard to believe, but it has now been over 2 months since the October 7th massacre, the bloodiest, the most deadly massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Here's the good news, though, folks. The Israel Defense Forces are making major gains right now in their stated goal of crushing Hamas in Gaza. Here is the state of play right now. The IDF has largely taken control in northern Gaza, which was the main power base of Hamas, in particular Gaza City. Now, there is still some fierce fighting in pockets of northern Gaza, but again, Hamas has largely lost control of the north, and that means they have shifted their operations to the south. But guess what? The IDF has been hot on their trail. Right now, Israel is engaged also in fierce fighting in southern Gaza, in particular in Khan Yunis. Now, why is Khan Yunis important? Well, a few reasons. Number one, Khan Yunis is the second largest city in the Gaza Strip. But number two, Israel believes that Hamas's top leadership in the Gaza Strip is hiding in those terror tunnels beneath Khan Yunis. I'm thinking in particular of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza. Now, Israeli officials say that Sinwar is a dead man walking, and if he is indeed in those tunnels beneath Khan Yunis. We may have a major announcement on that front in the days to come. And remember, folks, some 300 miles of Hamas tunnels stretching underneath Gaza, literally a subterranean city. Now, the IDF is trying to tackle that tunnel problem in a few ways. Number one, with airstrikes, obviously, collapsing the tunnels in on those Hamas terrorists. Secondly, drones, even sending dogs into the tunnels to try to root out these Hamas terrorists. But another unique tactic that Israel is reportedly now using in Gaza is to flood those tunnels with seawater from the Mediterranean Sea. Right now, Israel controls some 40% of the territory above ground in Gaza. But again, the main problem, the real sticking point here, is that vast network of terror tunnels beneath Gaza. But at the end of the day, Israel making great gains, no doubt, in this war to decisively crush Hamas once and for all so that it never again poses any sort of threat to the world's one and only Jewish state. Now, we've had hundreds of Hamas fighters in recent days surrender to the IDF. We hope that becomes a massive movement of thousands upon thousands of Hamas jihadists surrendering to the IDF so that the war could be shortened. And of course, Yahya Sinwar, the other key factor here, can he be eliminated by the IDF? But in the meantime, remember, Hamas is, and I don't say this lightly, folks, a demonic death cult. These are modern day Nazis, only wearing different uniforms. These are fanatics. And we had a taste of that fanaticism recently with some comments from top Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh about the fight in Gaza. Take a look.
بل إن الدم في غزة إلى جانب المقاومة والقسام سينتصر على هذا المحتل، سينتصر على هذا العدو. كما قلت وفي كل مرة أكرر، إن دماء الأطفال والنساء والشيوخ لا أقول تستصرخكم، بل نحن الذين نحتاج هذه الدماء لكي توقظ فينا روح الثورة، لكي توقظ فينا العناد، لكي توقظ فينا التحدي والسير إلى الأمام.
I mentioned the term death cult. Now do you see why? We need the blood, he says, of women, children, and the elderly. And of course, this Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, says all of this from the comfort of his abode in Qatar, thousands of miles away from the Gaza Strip, where reportedly Haniyeh has a personal wealth to the tune of billions of dollars. I wonder where those billions came from. All those billions in international aid funneled into Gaza over the past several years did not go to build schools, to feed the people of Gaza. No, those billions went to build terror tunnels and finance the lavish lifestyles of the likes of Ismail Haniyeh. Now, we want to give a big shout out and a thanks to Palestinian Media Watch to providing that clip. And remember, folks, Gaza is just one ring in a larger Iranian-backed ring of fire that surrounds Israel on all sides. And helpful reminder, Israel is the size of the state of New Jersey, and yet it's surrounded by Gaza, of course, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad there, Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon, the Houthis further south, the various Iran-backed Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. So a quick tour of that ring of fire and multiple fronts. Hezbollah right now in Lebanon continues on a daily basis to launch rockets and anti-tank missiles at northern Israel. Now, the IDF is responding and responding forcefully. Dozens of Hezbollah terrorists have been killed in these exchanges, but you have to think that eventually Israel is going to have to deal with Hezbollah to the north. I know that Israel does not want to fight right now, and understandably on multiple fronts, but you have to believe, folks, that once the dust settles in Gaza and Hamas is crushed, that the IDF will need, out of necessity, to turn its attention to the north, to Hezbollah. It is an unsustainable situation to have Hamas terrorists perched on your northern border with every intent to duplicate the carnage of October 7th. And quick reminder, Hezbollah is magnitudes more powerful than Hamas, equipped with some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel. Ultimately, and Israeli leaders have said this in recent days, the goal is to push Hezbollah back from the Israel-Lebanon border, back some 20 miles beyond the Litani River. So a larger battle is looming to the north. We've called it here on Under Fire the coming Great Northern War. In the meantime, to the south, some 1,000 miles south of Israel, lies Yemen, and that is the home of the Iran-backed Houthi rebels who have been very active in recent days, firing rockets and missiles in the direction of Israel. Now, thankfully, these rockets and missiles have been intercepted by both Israeli air defenses and U.S. destroyers stationed in the Red Sea. But the Houthis have taken it a step further now and are hijacking shipping in the Red Sea. Folks, this is a major problem developing off the coast of Yemen in that vital Red Sea, a crucial waterway that eventually the U.S., Israel, or both are going to have to deal with. Now, in terms of October 7th and the carnage of that day, some 1,200 mostly civilian Israelis slaughtered, over 240 more dragged away into captivity in Gaza, that is still fresh in our minds here on Israel Under Fire, and yet some leaders around the world seem to have relatively shorter memories, let's just say. We had the leaders, the prime ministers of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand release a statement this week calling for an immediate ceasefire to Israel's activities. And even President Biden said that Israel is, quote, indiscriminately bombing civilians in Gaza. Now, he knows that's not true. As we've documented here on Israel Under Fire, the IDF is the most humane fighting force alongside the U.S. military in human history. I know that's a quite bold statement to make, but I believe it is accurate. The Israel Defense Forces go to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties, and yet we have increasing this chorus of Western leaders pressuring Israel. Well, if Israel did agree to a premature ceasefire, which is not happening, what would Hamas do? What would Hamas do if it was left alive to fight another day? We got a clue recently from Hamas official Osama Hamdan and some comments he made about Hamas's future goals. Take a look.
لو عاد الزمن بكم إلى 6 تشرين بتعملوا 7 تشرين كنتوا؟
لماذا يفترض البعض أننا سنتراجع عن دورنا وفعلنا المقاوم؟
ما في ندم يعني؟
ندم أننا حطمنا فرقة غزة، فرقة كاملة في جيش الاحتلال.
قلت لي انه في حال الاسرائيليين رجعوا اقدموا على اعتقالات جديده بعد تصفير السجون بتعملوا عمليه ثانيه، يعني يمكن ان تعدوا ب7 اكتوبر جديده؟
انا استطيع ان اعد بمعركه تحرير قادمه وليس فقط 7 اكتوبر.
بالمدى المنظور؟
لا اظن ان ذلك سيكون بعيدا. ما حصل في 7 اكتوبر وما بعده اوضح بجلاء أن هذا الكيان مستقبله في المنطقة ليس مضمونا.
Thanks again to Palestinian Media Watch for another very revealing clip. Clearly, folks, Hamas wants to duplicate October 7th, and if they are left alive and kicking, they will try to do exactly that. Thankfully, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen have said that's a non-starter, and despite international pressure, Netanyahu said just today, we will not stop, and I quote, nothing will stop us, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, from our stated goal of destroying Hamas. Well, someone who knows that stated goal very well and is doing battle in the international arena in the very important sphere of public relations and getting the message out on behalf of Israel is Elan Levy, Israeli government spokesman, joins us from Tel Aviv now. Elan, thanks so much for taking a break from your very busy schedule to join us. Hey, you've been making the case for Israel in the international arena 24/7 around the clock since October 7th. For our viewers, why would it be disastrous for Israel to agree to a ceasefire now and leave Hamas alive to fight another day?
Eric, that was an excellent summary, and I wish I could see you presenting on BBC and Sky News as well, because you got straight to the point. Hamas is threatening us with another October 7th massacre again and again, as many as it takes, until they murder every man, woman, and child in our country. And that is the meaning of any end to the fighting that does not end with the end of Hamas. Because those calling for an immediate ceasefire want to leave Hamas free to attack our people like it did on 10/7, and emboldened, because the next time Hamas will think it has the backing of the international community to perpetrate more acts of rape and burning and beheadings, knowing that it has the world behind it that won't let Israel defend its people. And that's why we've been standing very firmly against international pressure. That's why Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been telling the world very clearly, despite all the pressure, that we are going to continue defeating Hamas until we achieve all three of our war aims: the total destruction of Hamas, the return of all the hostages, and to make sure that the Gaza Strip can never hurt our people again. Those are the three goals set forward by the War Cabinet under Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership, and those are the goals we're going to continue to pursue.
Elan, one of those goals, obviously, seeing the release of the hostages, still some 130, it seems, hostages in the clutches of Hamas in Gaza. Do you have any update on the status of the remaining hostages and the efforts to see them freed?
There are 135 people who are still being held hostage since 10/7, including 19 who were murdered by Hamas, which is now holding onto their bodies for a ransom. There are still women there, and there are still children who are being held hostage by Hamas. Now, the policy that Prime Minister Netanyahu's war cabinet declared at the beginning has been vindicated. It came under criticism. People were skeptical about whether it would work, but Prime Minister Netanyahu's strategy has proven itself. And that is to put unrelenting military pressure on Hamas to force it to release our hostages. That was how we got the last hostage release pause. We put unrelenting military pressure on Hamas, we clobbered it, we had it begging for a breather, and in exchange for a few days' pause, it was willing to release hostages, and we got 110 of them out. But then on December 1st, Hamas decided to break the agreement, to terminate the hostage release pause, to hold on to the remaining women and children, and to resume hostilities against Israel. And the strategy that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet are promoting now with full force is to keep pressuring Hamas until it releases all the hostages. We are committed to that pledge that there will be no one left behind. The Prime Minister, Netanyahu, has said very clearly, we will fight to get everyone out. The women and the men, the young and the old, the soldiers and the civilians. There will be no one left behind, because none of us here in Israel are free until all of them are free.
Yeah, and Elan, Israel, the IDF, are trying to do this, and they're doing a great job of it under probably the world's strictest military rules of engagement. The IDF goes to extraordinary lengths to spare any civilian casualties, and yet we hear this constant drumbeat, including here in the West, these calls for Israel to, quote, respect and follow international humanitarian law. I don't think that needs to be said. I think Israel's doing a pretty good job of that, but nonetheless, that international pressure mounts, and we hear accusations of Israel indiscriminately targeting civilians in Gaza, et cetera. What's your take on that? And can you just set the record straight for everyone watching about how seriously the IDF does take civilian casualties and avoiding them at all costs, even at times putting Israeli soldiers at risk to avoid killing any civilians?
You know, this war could have been over on October 8th if Israel had decided to unleash its full firepower and not care about civilians. But we care about civilians, and that's why the IDF has been going to lengths that no army in the history of warfare has done to try to keep civilians safe from their own leaders, because Hamas is trying to maximize casualties while we are trying to minimize them. I know it may sound difficult to accept given some of the scenes we are seeing, but the IDF is setting a new gold standard now. for counterterrorism in urban areas, when the enemy is deliberately trying to sacrifice civilians, it sounds sick and it is twisted. Hamas is trying to sacrifice Palestinian civilians in the hope that will generate international sympathy, in the hope that will generate international pressure that will tie Israel's hands and stop us from defending ourselves. And we are going after Hamas leaders with incredible precision. That's why from 22,000 strikes that we have conducted, even if you accept the casualty numbers that Hamas is presenting and we dispute them, you're looking at less than 0.8 deaths per strike. That tells you the incredible precision with which we are attacking Hamas infrastructure and Hamas terrorists. And we are going after all of their leaders. We've taken out half of the Hamas battalion commanders. We killed the commander of the Shaja'iyah battalion. And then when his deputy took over, we killed him. And then we're telling his replacement that he is on notice too as well. Because it is very important as well for the war cabinet led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that we will use the full force of the IDF against the monsters who perpetrated 10/7 while upholding our obligations under international law. And I have to say, we take international law and the international rules-based order so much more seriously than the people who try to make up the rules and make up international law in a way to hurt Israel and to try to keep the Hamas terror regime on life support. And that's a terror regime that this government, headed by Prime Minister Netanyahu, is determined to bring to its knees.
Elan, last question. We have about 45 seconds. Hey, you were born and raised in London. You were educated at Oxford. You made Aliyah to Israel. And now you are doing battle in the ideological war, I guess you would say, the war of ideas on behalf of Israel. You're on the BBC, Sky News. Not always easy, needless to say. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
We have to win. We have to win because we need children to be able to sleep safely in their beds in Kfar Aza and Nir Oz and Be'eri. What happened on 10/7 was the bloodiest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and that cannot go unanswered. Israeli society is united with a very strong sense of justice and unity right now around an understanding that we must win this war. We didn't want this war. We didn't start this war. We didn't expect this war, but we must win this war. And it must end with the end of Hamas, because that is the only way that we can bring security for us, for our children, and that we can begin to rebuild our lives after the horrific, unspeakable atrocities of 10/7.
Elan Levy, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Hanukkah, my friend. We will see you again soon. Keep up the great work. God bless.
Thank you very much. You too.
Thanks,
God
Elan.
bless.
Telling it like it is, folks, this is really no time to mince words. Great insights there from Elan Levy, and he's really become one of Israel's most eloquent spokesmen in battling back against this anti-Israel narrative that we've seen take hold. I'm sad to say, across the world, we have anti-Semitism at levels unseen since the days of the Nazis in the run-up to World War II. The difference now is that where it was largely localized in Nazi Germany, of course, in Europe, this is now a global phenomenon and not a good one, obviously. So we will continue here on Israel Under Fire to sound the alarm, to have guests on like Elan Levy and others who are telling the truth and giving you the ammo you need, the intellectual ammo to fight this war of ideas on behalf of Israel. Hey, Israel needs a few good friends right now, and we've got millions upon millions of evangelical Christians who are stepping up to do exactly that. Well, a very good friend of Israel, a former chief of staff for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is Yakel Leiter. He's here with us now. His son, Moshe, 39 years old, a father of 6, a brave IDF soldier, was killed in action last month fighting Hamas terrorists. Yakel joins us to tell Moshe's story and to share the stakes, why Israel must fight. Yakel, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, we are so sorry for your loss, and we're just so honored that you're here with us during this difficult time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, you are a former chief of staff for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You had a very important conversation with him recently, but I wanted to start, Yakel, with You sharing a little bit about your son, Moshe, why he was such a special, special man, a father, a soldier. Tell us more about Moshe.
Moshe was my firstborn, the oldest of 8 children. And he was a very remarkable human being. He was not only my firstborn, but he was also my best friend. I would frequent his advice because he just had tremendous insight into life. He was full of life. He had a zest and zeal for life. He spent 15 years in our equivalent of the Delta Force or the SAS in Great Britain, our Shaldog unit, Special Ops in the Air Force. And after 15 years, at the age of 33, he decided to go to med school. And he went to the first medical class at Ariel University. And he was actually supposed to start his rounds of clinical training on October 8th this year. But he completed his medical studies while he was studying for his medical degree. He would do 80, 90 days of reserve duty a year. He was a major, but he decided to go into this battle as a squadron commander because he loved his soldiers in his organic unit and they loved him. And just following up on your previous conversation with Elon Levy, it's quite possible that if Israel was not as careful as it is about collateral damage, that my son would be alive. We chose to enter Gaza with infantry and with special forces instead of strafe bombing the entire area, which we could have done. I think probably most any other country in the world would have done. So when people so easily, cavalierly criticize us about collateral damage, they ought to know first what they're talking about. And I know how much my son cared for human life, and he left 6 children behind. I just came from a Hanukkah party at his home. His youngest son is 4 months old, never know his dad, and I know that it's tough. We're a bereaved family. We're grieving him, but we're also very, very proud because his battle is not only the battle of the Jewish people in the state of Israel, but it's the battle of sanity. It's the battle of humanity against barbarism. It's a battle for Western civilization is what it is, not just for Israel's safety. And the sooner people in Europe and the United States understand that, the more support we're going to get.
Yakil, so true. Israel is truly the first line of defense for Western civilization. You had a chance to speak with Prime Minister Netanyahu recently. Of course, you worked as his chief of staff previously. Can you share any of what you shared with the Prime Minister about the importance of finishing this war, finishing the goal, the job of crushing Hamas?
Well, really, you have to understand, I'll get to my conversation with the Prime Minister in a moment, but what really needs to be understood is that, even President Biden referred to Hamas, those who perpetrated the attacks of 10/7 as bestial, as animals. But we have to appreciate the fact that there isn't just a group of terrorists. They're 30 to 40,000 strong. I mean, that's, quite a sizable army, and that was a government of 2 million people in Gaza. All of the funding that came from the international community was poured into those tunnels. Now, understand what we're talking about when we speak about a tunnel city. We're talking about, something the width almost of the state of Pennsylvania, 300, 400 miles of tunnels that contain weapons smuggled in over the Egyptian border. The Egyptians have not been doing what we would expect of a partner in peace to be doing. We're going to have to insist on that. So when the Prime Minister talks about ending Hamas, we're talking about ending a government that is an occupying force controlling 2 million people and stealing their funds, taking their money, and using it to import Iranian weapons and Iranian funding in order to threaten not only Israel, but Western civilization, as I said. When the prime minister called me, I was on the way to my son's funeral, and he called with a message of consolation. And I said, you know, Bibi, I want to demand of you one thing, that my son's blood was not spent in vain, and that this job you take to the end, you finish this, and make sure there's no more Hamas at the end of this process. And the prime minister said, Yechiel, I swear. He didn't say he chose to use the words very carefully. He said, I swear that I will not stop until this job is done. This is a matter of protecting and defending humanity against the ultimate evil. You know, Eric, if I just can make another point, you know, we're products of a generation. I guess I'm a little bit older, judging from my gray hair and your looks, that I'm a little older than you are. But we belong to a generation where progressivism and wokeism has taken hold of society. And it's a wokeism that says that there's no objective truth. We kind of laugh at history and make fun of anything that might smack of values. But these guys in Hamas, the Iranians, you know, they are teaching us that there is something called objective truth, and there is something called objective morality, and there is something called objective evil. It's not a kind of a subjective game where everybody determines for himself what evil is. These people are the paradigms of evil, and this is a cult of death. I think you said in your introduction. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're celebrating Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the festival of lights, and it's an interesting thing about fire. You know, fire consumes, but fire also illuminates, and we have to use fire judiciously. We have to use fire against our enemies. We have to use firepower because sometimes it's the only language that they understand. And then internally, we can use fire for illumination, to light and for warmth. And hopefully, if we properly eliminate the terrorists and the evil, we'll be able to use light for warmth and for light.
Israel is a light in the darkness. Yechiel, your son Moshe was certainly like that. Yechiel, God bless you and your family, your grandchildren. May Moshe's memory be a blessing. Happy Hanukkah. We'd love to have you back again soon to share your insights. This was powerful, Yechiel. Thank you so much. Hang in there. We'll all be praying for you. The entire TBN family are praying for you and your family.
Well, thank you very much, Eric, and thank you. God bless you for continuing to telling the truth. And your prayers are much appreciated. I still have 4 other sons in the Army and 2 sons-in-law in the thick of battle. So your prayers are much appreciated.
We'll keep them coming, Yechiel. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Powerful insights there from Yechiel Leiter and his son Moshe. Again, folks, paying the ultimate sacrifice, 39 years old, 6 children, a beautiful wife, studying to become a doctor. He was a paramedic. These are the stakes right now. This is what Israel is up against. People like Moshe promising young family men who have everything to live for. They're putting it all on the line to preserve their way of life, to preserve their very existence. This is an existential struggle that Israel is locked in, not only against Hamas in Gaza, but Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the head of the snake behind this regional terror, the Iranian regime in Tehran. Now, it is Hanukkah, and Christmas is also nearly upon us. And when we talk about being a light in the darkness and looking for some positivity out of all the darkness, out of the evil that was unleashed on October 7th, folks, we have got a story for you as we close here on Israel Under Fire. Amelia Aloni, she and her mother Daniela, Amelia, 5 years old, was ripped from her home on October 7th and taken hostage in Gaza. Amelia, thankfully, was released during that truce when dozens of Israeli hostages were released by Hamas terrorists. Amelia, 5 years old, was one of them, thank God. And she recently returned to her kindergarten in Israel and was greeted by her teacher and her classmates. Take a look at the reception she received.
Oh. Yo, sabale, قبل خمسة. Bow. כזה ריגוש. איפה הבלונים? איזה חמודות.
מירב, אני רוצה תמונה איתה.
רמוס, אני חייבת על מאבא. איזה כיף לראות כמה פעמים נסעתי בדרך, הלב היה נצבט.
Folks, I have two daughters of my own, and I just kept thinking about them as I was watching that clip with little Amelia. Can you imagine what she went through week upon week in Hamas captivity in a tunnel somewhere beneath Gaza? But you know what? Light triumphed over darkness once again, and in this existential struggle, literally pitting good and evil against each other. There are no gray areas here, folks. It's very black and white. Israel is engaged in a civilizational struggle against demonic evil in Gaza. The light will win out. It always will. Thanks so much for joining us here on Israel Under Fire. Until next time, God bless you. We'll see you again soon.
Praise the Lord. This is Pastor Derek Thomas of Living Witness Ministries, and I want to invite you to our new Saturday Night Live worship service, Saturday evenings at 5:30 p.m. at Hope City Church, 2240 North National Avenue. The Lord is moving mightily by His Spirit in these days, and we want you to be a part of the movement God has on the South Side. God is moving to win souls. He's moving to save people. He's moving to heal, deliver, and set free. You don't want to miss out on the movement. Don't meet us there, beat us there Saturday nights, 5:30 p.m. for Saturday Night Live, our LWM worship service in Milwaukee at Hope City Church, 2240 North National Avenue. Look forward to seeing you there. God bless.
Welcome to a very special edition of Israel Under Fire. I'm Eric Stakelbeck, and I wanted to start tonight with a quick reminder, because it seems, sadly, that far too many have already forgotten that some 240 people, including toddlers, the elderly, and U.S. citizens, are still being held captive by Hamas terrorists in Gaza. 240 people, sons, daughters, grandparents, husbands, wives, who were violently separated from their families and quite literally dragged from their homes into Gaza, where Hamas has a massive network of underground tunnels that stretches some 300 miles beneath the Strip. It was described by one elderly hostage who was held in the tunnels and released as being like a spider web. Now, the Israel Defense Forces are working night and day to destroy these tunnels and to rescue the hostages. It's a fierce fight against an evil, demonic foe, a death cult. Folks, that's what Hamas is. Make no mistake, these are modern-day Nazis, just in different uniforms. And as this fight rages, the loved ones of the captives are waiting and praying and dreaming of a day very soon when there will be a great and miraculous reunion. Hey, God's arm is not too short. He can do this. And here at TBN, we have not forgotten, and we will not forget those 240 souls, including 30 children, including Holocaust survivors, who are being used as a bargaining chip by a vicious terror group that, God willing, is in the process of being crushed once and for all. Over the next hour, you'll hear from Israel's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Eli Cohen, along with the families of some of the hostages who are being held in Gaza right now. You will hear their personal stories about how their lives were turned upside down on October 7th and why they will never give up hope. And you'll learn what you can do to help and to bless the people of Israel. We're joined now from Israel by Avikai Broditz. On that horrific morning of October 7th, Avikai's wife Hagar and his children, Ofri, 10 years old, Yuval, 8 years old, and Uriah, 4.5, were kidnapped from their home in Kfar Aza by Hamas and dragged into Gaza. Avikai, thanks so much for joining us. I can't begin to imagine what you're going through right now. Tell us first about your beautiful family and why they're so special.
Well, my wife, Hagar, we've been together for 22 years. So, it's more than half my life that I'm together with each other. I love her so much. We've gone through everything together. The good times and now the bad times, but I know we'll go back to good times. I hope it will be soon. Our love is just endless, and just miss her so much. And I'm waiting for all of them, but I just love her so much. So waiting for her to come back home, so we can be together again. My eldest, she's my daughter, so my only daughter. She's everything to me. She, we sit around every day when she comes back from school, and we talk a lot, and she teaches me everything, and I try to teach her a few things. She just celebrated her birthday on October 8th, so it was on that Sunday after it all happened on that Saturday. So the day after it was her birthday, but we were meaning to celebrate on Saturday. And so her cake is still waiting for her. And I hope Agar will bake her a new cake when she returns. Yuval, my middle child, he's has the soul, really sensitive soul. He loves playing soccer, and he loves his Xbox. He loves playing with his friends. And, he loves his Legos. So he's got all the Minecraft Legos. Got a whole drawer full of Legos that he likes to build. He likes to play soccer, inside the house with his brother, with Uriah. And Uriah, he likes to play outside a lot. So he likes to play in the mud. He makes mud in the yard, and he likes to spoil all my flowers and everything I plant, make mud out of it, and play with his tractors, with his toy tractors, and then come back home and make a big mess out of it. So that's how he is. Just likes to mess everything up. But now I miss it. I miss the mess he makes. So I wish they would all come back and make a big mess in the house. So, now I miss the mess.
And we pray that that's going to happen very soon, Avikai. This is almost too painful to even ask you, but can you recount at all what you remember about the events of October 7th? Your community, Kfar Aza, a beautiful community, a little over a mile from the Gaza border. Some 70 Hamas terrorists stormed your community and carried out unspeakable atrocities and, of course, carried hostages captive back to Gaza. What do you recollect from that day?
I can recollect mostly what I felt going through all of this. My family was taken from me on that day. along with a little girl named Abigail. She was a neighbor's girl. You know, they killed her parents. I buried them almost 2 weeks ago. Oi, her dad, was a good friend of mine. And her mom, Smadar, she was a saint. They killed her, and Abigail came running to our home. She was full of her dad's blood. I guess they shot him, and she managed to escape. I saw her, picked her up, and handed her over to my wife. And they all went inside to the safe room to hide. And they hid there for more than 4 hours before they came in and took them to Gaza. So I stayed outside, I tried to help, and I stayed in touch with my wife over the phone. And at around 11, that was the last message I sent her. And the last message she sent back, she said, they were coming in. That was the last message I received. And no more messages from her after that. And, you know, I was sure they were killed because I couldn't get in touch. I couldn't come back home. And, well, the day after I got some news, the best news I ever got in my life. They told me that they had been seen alive, being led with an armed man going towards Gaza. So I knew they were alive, and I felt I got my family back. And I knew they would return soon, but now it's been over a month, and I'm still waiting for them to return so I can hug them and be with them. And I'm still waiting, so I've been praying a lot, and, you know, I need the whole world to pray for me and with me for their return.
Yes. Avikai, you've been working tirelessly for their release. You even met with the Qatari ambassador in an attempt to secure your family's release from captivity. Can you tell us more about that journey over the past month as you advocate for the hostages' release?
Sure. Well, I came all the way to Washington to meet the Qatari ambassador. He's a great man that he accepted my request to come and meet him. And I sat with him, and he listened, and he was really empathic. And he gave me a lot of hope that my family will be released, and all the children that were taken will be released. And, you know, I know everybody's working hard to do that. And I know he's been doing a lot for that cause. And I really hope for it, you know, to solve and to have my family back.
Avikai, you are a hands-on family man. Your family is your life. We know that. And our viewers at TBN around the world watching right now are praying for you. I want you to know personally, and praying for every member of your family. Again, your wife Hagar, Ofri, Yuval, and Uriah, your beautiful children. What more can we do? Is there anything we can do to help? Because I know people watching right now want to help in some tangible way. What can we do? What can we do to help?
Well, you know, a lot of people have been praying for me. I've been praying myself. I went to the Wailing Wall, and we had a big prayer, and I think everybody in Israel is praying. And, you know, I think a lot of pressure needs to be put for all the children and all the women and all the hostages to be released, to return to their families. You know, I think all the media should do their side of this bargain, to put pressure on the sides to release the hostages. And all the leaders of the world should do their part in putting pressure to release the hostages and doing all they can for this cause. You know, it's such an obvious humanitarian cause that women and children shouldn't be held captive. They shouldn't be part of any conflict.
Yeah, Avikai, I can tell you that we will not rest here at TBN. We will not stop until your family comes home, until the hostages come home where they belong. And by the way, when you have that birthday party for Ofri, and I know that birthday cake is still waiting for her, we can't wait to hear all about it. We can't wait to hear about that incredible reunion, that belated birthday party, but the greatest birthday party you've ever seen. That's coming soon. We're praying that, Avikai, and we believe God can do that. Thanks so much for joining us, my friend. Hang in there. We will see you again soon, Avikai. God bless. Folks, this is probably the toughest program I've ever hosted. And you can see why. You just heard Avikai's story, and there's more to come, but we need to hear it. We need to know. First of all, as intercessors, as prayer warriors, we need to know how to pray for such a time as this. Most difficult show on one hand. On the other hand, this is the most important program I have ever hosted here on TBN, bar none. These are our families. These are your kids, your grandparents, your grandchildren. This is happening now in real time. It could have been any of us. These families were wrenched, literally taken from their beds early in the morning of October 7th and dragged into the bowels of hell in these tunnels beneath Gaza. But we believe that God has a good plan here for a miraculous rescue mission, that these hostages, against all odds, will come home. They will be reunited with their families. And the government of Israel right now is doing everything it can to make that a reality. We're joined now by the man who's the point man, really, on those efforts in many ways. Israel's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Eli Cohen, joins us right now from Jerusalem. Minister Cohen, it's great to see you again. I wish it was under better circumstances, of course. What can you tell us, first of all, about the current status? What do we know about the hostages right now in Gaza? We assume most are alive. How are they being treated? Do we have any more details on that front?
Eric, first I would like to thank you and for TBN for this special broadcast in regards to the hostages. This is something that it's unimaginable, that while we are speaking, 241 right now in hostage, 9 months old, which is a baby, twins, 3 years old, a daughter, 4-year-old, that their parents murdered, entire family in hostage. Holocaust survivor above 85 are right now in captive. Eric, they are not inhuman. They are monsters. As we speak in right now, which more than 4 weeks since the 7th of October, even the Red Cross did not meet the hostages yet. Part of them injured. There is sick people between them.
Mr. Cohen, it seems that the world, unfortunately, has a very short memory. Can you remind our viewers of the horrors of October 7th? I know it's difficult even to talk about it, but why Hamas did this, why Hamas dragged hostages back to the bowels beneath Gaza, and what this terror organization is all about.
I just came from a film of 46 minutes which described the atrocities that made by Hamas. After President Biden saw part of the atrocities, he said that Hamas, they are worse than ISIS. What you are seeing there, how they rape women and then burn them after, how they beheaded people, how they murdered children's entire family. They had few goals: to murder as much Jews as they can. And as Hamas said, from the day first of the establishment, their wishful is to destroy the state of Israel, the state of the Jewish people.
Despite the obvious evil of Hamas, we have some in the world calling for an immediate ceasefire now Before Israel gets a chance to finish the job and decisively crush Hamas, Minister, talk about why that would be so dangerous for Israel, a premature ceasefire, and for the world if Hamas were left to fight another day and if a ceasefire was called too early.
Can anyone imagine to have a ceasefire with the Nazis or with ISIS or with Hamas, which murder brutally families, and their goal is to destruct the state of Israel? I would like to say it clear. West will be the next unless we will distract Hamas, which actually murder more than 1,400 of our people and actually took in captive the Palestinian in Gaza. And the terrorists are like a cancer. Their wishful is to expand like they did before with ISIS, and this is their goal as well in this time. So therefore we are all focused to ensure to eliminate Hamas till the last one. If we will not stop them, they will reach to New York, to Paris, to Berlin, and this is our goal. For the state of Israel, for the security of our people, and for the entire free world. Israel is the last frontier of the West.
Minister Cohen, so true, and you make a great point. We already see it reaching in many ways right here in the West. Just take a look, I'm sad to say, at American college campuses right now and the massive explosion of pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic sentiment there. We've got a lot more to discuss, Minister Cohen. You'll be joining us later in the show to talk about Iran's role in this, what we can do here in the United States and at TBN, and much more. So, Minister Cohen, we will see you a bit later in the show. Stand by. In the meantime, I want to head back to Israel and speak to Ayelet Levy. Now, Ayelet's daughter is an amazing girl. Nama is 19 years old. She served in an all-female unit of the Israel Defense Forces. She was forcibly taken hostage by Hamas terrorists on the morning of October 7th and taken back into Gaza. She is now being held captive, but Ayelet is keeping her story alive every day, including right here for us tonight. Ayelet, thanks so much for joining us. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult the past month has been for you. I know how close you and your daughter Nama are. Tell us first about her. I mentioned at the top what a special girl she was, an athlete, a scholar, and much more. Tell us more about her and why she's so dear to you.
She didn't have a chance yet, actually. She finished her high school and then had 1 year of like a volunteer year that she did, a special year after high school. So she just got, after that 1 year, she just got basic training, and then 2 days before October 7th, she was she arrived at Nahal Oz. So she didn't really have a chance to be there yet. She's very strong and very brave, and I'm thinking about that since she's been there. And she's gentle, and she doesn't talk so much. She doesn't speak so much. She's a girl of actions. She's always been an athlete, and she was in training for triathlons, and then she was a tennis player. And in her high school, she studied. She majored in diplomacy, and these are the things that are important for her. And her volunteer year, they do like Israeli social studies, and they work with different populations. She was volunteering in a kindergarten for African refugees in Eilat. This was what she did this year. And I said she doesn't talk so much, but But every day, at the end of the day, we always had that conversation that we talk to each other, and she tells me what went on that day and what were the difficult parts and what were the good parts. And I miss those talks so much. I keep talking to her now all the time. And I tell her, you do your thing. You know what to do. You're tough.
Ayelet, Nama was so special, and we can see your face light up when you talk about her. I hate to even bring this up, but we have to because people need to know. The events of October 7th, when Nama and her all-female unit of the Israel Defense Forces were ravaged by Hamas and dragged into Gaza. Tell us more about that morning and how you found out about it.
Well, the day started at 6:30. The sirens went off in where we live in Ra'anana. So I was downstairs with the kids to the safe room, and then when we went back upstairs, I texted Nama and I said, "Are you okay?" I said, she answered, "We're in the safe room," and I've never seen and heard anything like this in my life. At this point, we didn't know anything that was going on. We didn't know, we didn't have a clue. I just thought there were probably missiles from Gaza, and that she's hearing them very loud, the launches, because she's very close. She's never been so close. It was just her second day there. And so I wasn't very alarmed at this point. So a few hours went by, a couple of hours. I was planning to go visit her that Saturday with my boys. And I had all the food ready and things that she wanted me to bring her. But then I understood that we can't really go anywhere because things were unclear. So we played Monopoly, and then I think it was around 11 that I got a call from Nama's father that he received a video one of the cousins saw, and then there's a very, very explicit film of her in Gaza being hauled out of a vehicle from the backside. She's handcuffed, she's wounded, and she's grabbed by the hair, and there's gun shooting all around, and they put her in the front, in the back seat, from the baggage to the back seat of that vehicle. She's shoved in, and it's her, and it's located in Gaza.
Ayelet, we are with you. We share in your mourning, but we also share in your hope. This is not over, and we strongly believe that Nama will return home, will be in your arms once again, laughing with you and celebrating with you once again. In the meantime, we're keeping it alive here on TBN. We're keeping this story alive. Number one, what can we do? What can our millions of viewers around the world watching right now do? And secondly, I know for a fact, Ayelet, that we have decision makers, government officials in Israel watching this show. The foreign minister, Eli Cohen, is actually a part of this program. We've also got decision makers in Washington, D.C., here in the United States, where I'm sitting, watching as well. What do you want to say to them, and what can they do to bring the hostages home?
First of all, don't leave this subject for a minute. It cannot go, underground. Everybody needs to know about this. Everybody needs to know about all the horrible things, all the atrocities that have been done. It's really difficult because we really don't know what to do. But I think the pressure that can come from the United States and other countries is really important. That's what I understand. I'm not a diplomat. I don't know anything about this kind of thing, and I don't know about army maneuvers or anything. I'm a physician. I'm a family physician. I'm a doctor on my day job. So my talk now is just to have everyone know about this. Anyone who can do anything and influence and make this end as quick as possible. Every day counts. It's been over 30 days. Today is November 7th. All this happened October 7th. And we haven't had any notice, nothing from the Red Cross, nothing from the World Health Organization. I've been talking to all of them. So there has to be pressure on the different organizations and countries in order for something to happen here.
I want to make a promise to you here on behalf of our entire team at TBN. We will not forget this. We're not letting this story go. We're not letting Nama go. We're not letting you go. We are with you. We are praying for you every day by name, daily, and we believe that you will be reunited with Nama very soon. We believe we will have a miraculous reunion to report here on a future episode of Israel Under Fire. Hey, hang in there, okay? We're praying for you. God bless you. We will have you back again soon. Keep us posted. Thanks again for joining us. God bless Ayelet. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Folks, the stories are literally endless of the tragedy of October 7th, but we believe that ultimately there will be triumph related to that day. Number one, the hostages will come home, and number two, Hamas will be crushed once and for all and will never be able to threaten the world ever again. In the meantime, let's stay in Israel. We want to speak to Oded Ashkenazi. Oded's sister-in-law was kidnapped by Hamas terrorists and taken hostage on October 7th. She is a very, very special woman, and Oded and his parents every day are awaiting her return. They're advocating on her behalf. Oded, thanks so much for joining us. I know how difficult it is for you to talk about this, so we can't thank you enough for even being here with us. First of all, tell us about your sister-in-law, why she is so special to you, and the kind of person she is.
So Doron is the sunlight of our family. She's a veterinarian nurse. She takes care of all the animals, all the people. She's the best aunt to my children. She spent every little time she has with them. And we miss her, and we want her back.
Can you tell us about the events of October 7th? I know she's a great person, Oded. Can you tell us about what exactly happened for her on October 7th as Hamas invaded your community?
Saturday morning, it all started with the red color alarm, the siren that we have against the Hamas rockets. And we went into the shelters room and stayed there until there was an explosion of the rocket. And then I went outside like every time, and I started to hear gunshots inside of the kibbutz, and this is really, really weird. It's not happening ever. And we understand we got penetrated by a terrorist and sent to all the family in the WhatsApp group to stay in the shelters room and lock themselves inside. And we talked the whole morning until in about 10 and 20. Doron talked with her mother on the phone and tell her the terrorists are around her house and she can hear gunshots. And the call was disconnected. And about 10:30 a.m., she sent a voice message to our friends that said, they caught me. And we never hear from her again. And we don't know what happened to her after that.
Oded, tell us how, on a personal level, I can't imagine how difficult this is for you, for your parents. It's been over a month now. How are you coping with this?
Yes.
How are you getting through this?
Day by day, we're trying to do everything that we can to bring her back, talk to whoever we can, and try to stay positive for the kids. And I have 2 little children. I need to stay positive for them and tell them that she will come back and that we're doing everything for this to happen.
How are you personally raising awareness about Doron and the situation? I know you've been very active, Oded, in raising awareness and sounding the alarm and making sure that people don't forget. Sadly, it seems that many around the world have already forgotten what happened on October 7th. How are you raising awareness and keeping this alive and keeping the hope alive of the situation that Doron will be brought back safely to your family and reunited?
So we are going to rallies in Israel. We're making the noise that we can make and talk to whoever we can through the Ministry of Defense and the people from the government. Tell them to do everything to bring them back. And yes, like you said, the world is starting to forget what happened to us on the 7th of October. It was an Holocaust. It was a massacre. They came in to murder us. They came into my house. I have two big dogs, and probably they scared them. But they left for me a hand grenade in the balloon gas that they didn't explode it. So I was saved by a miracle. And and now the world starting to believe their lies. And this is what the world wants to believe. This is lies.
Oded, we are praying for you, my friend. Hang in there. We're praying for your family. And we hope to have you back soon with an update, a great update of the miraculous return of your sister-in-law. Oded, God bless. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Folks, the stories are difficult to hear at times, but they're also encouraging to me. We are putting a human face on the hostages, and it's encouraging in that I know that God is moving. Number one, that he still sits on the throne. And that number two, these are beautiful, wonderful people who are loved. And I'm encouraged because I know that you, watching right now, are going to take this information and you are going to become advocates for these hostages. And number one, the best place to start, and where I know you will start, is prayer. It sounds very simple, but prayer works. Time and time again, the Bible is filled with stories, including in the land of Israel, of all places, of how prayer works and God works in a mighty way when his people start to move. So let's do it. That's really why we're doing this program at TBN. Number one, to raise awareness, of course, but number two, hey, we can raise awareness. We can get upset about it, get angered by it even. But at the end of the day, we want you to walk away from this program with a call to action. Here are your marching orders as prayer warriors, so to speak, as intercessors. Get on your knees and let's really move mountains here in the name of the Lord. So we're joined now by Inbal Perry, and her father, 79 years old, was taken into captivity in Gaza. Yes, I said 79 years old, folks. Hamas did not discriminate when it came to taking hostages, whether it was toddlers, grandparents, mothers, Holocaust survivors. Chaim is 79 years old. He's in Gaza right now. We believe he's coming home soon, and Inbal is here to tell us about him. Inbal, thank you so much for joining us. We can't imagine how difficult it is, but tell us about Chaim and why he's such a special man.
Hi, thank you for having me. Thank you for hearing me. It's very important for me and my family. I really think that story should be kept on hearing to everyone around the world and in Israel. On October 7th, Saturday morning, my father was taken from his house by the hand of Hamas. Only 2 weeks later, when the two elderly women released from Hamas prisoner, we only then learned that my father is alive and he's okay. That's the only thing we heard from him until today.
I can't imagine, Inbal, the terror, the horror that you felt, that your father felt. Again, your father is 79 years old, number one. Number two, he was a peace activist who actually worked to help children in Gaza and bring them to Israel for treatment. Talk more about his life's work and his approach to the Palestinians.
Yeah, that's right. My father lives in this kibbutz since the 60s. They always had very good relationship with the people from Gaza. They helped them in many ways. As you said, my father is a peace activist. He all the time, all of his life, he's doing everything to make the people of Gaza live better as much as they can, and helping them, like you said, helping them, driving them from the border to Israeli hospitals so they can get treatment that they cannot get in Gaza.
We pray that his optimism, right now, obviously, he is in such difficult circumstances in Baal. We pray that optimism is still there for him in Gaza. What do you want to see? Obviously, you want your father freed, number one. And it's hard to get details right now about where exactly they're being held. But what is your hope here? Obviously, your father comes home.
Of course, we want to see them, all of the kidnapped people. As you know, babies, small children, and my father, who is 79, and his friends, that they are also 80 years and older. Some of them need medication. We don't know how long they can stay in the condition that they are, which we don't really know what those conditions are.
Inbal, this is a double tragedy for you. We have to mention your father dragged into captivity by Hamas, but your younger brother was murdered by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, along with his girlfriend. Could you tell us about your brother, the kind of man that he was?
My brother, Daniel Darlington, is a British citizen. He was born and raised in Manchester. He is my brother from my mother's second marriage. He was 34 years old. He came to visit a lot. Every year he came to visit us, me and my other brother. He loved the kibbutz. He had many friends there. He was a photographer. He was a beautiful person. And on that terrible Saturday, actually he was supposed to come back to me. I live in the center of Israel. He was supposed to come back to me on Friday night. And he said, you know what, I'm going to stay another night, and then a friend will give me a ride to back to your house. And unfortunately, on Saturday morning, terrorists broke into the house he was staying in, a friend's house, and shot him and his German friend. Shot him, murdered him inside the safe room he was in.
Inbal, we can't thank you enough for joining us. We can't imagine what you are going through right now, but I want to assure you, we've got millions of people watching this program right now who are praying for you, for your family, for comfort, for peace, for shalom, for you and your family during this unimaginable time. And we are praying every day around the clock that your father and the other hostages are brought home safely, and he'll be in your arms once again. Inbal, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us. We will talk to you again soon. Keep us posted. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for hearing me. Your support is so important for me and my family. And we need your hugs, and thank you so much.
Thanks again, Inbal. We have Israel's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Eli Cohen, standing by to join us once again. Minister Cohen, thanks for being with us. You and I earlier were discussing, and several of our guests have discussed tonight, how they've been horrified by this global surge in Jew hatred and anti-Semitism. I would argue this is the worst outbreak of anti-Semitism that we've seen since World War II, including right here in the West, in places like New York City, Washington, D.C., London, Paris, where we've seen these massive pro-Hamas, anti-Israel rallies since October 7th. How concerned are you about this, and what can be done to fight back against it? Of course, it's not helpful to have the Secretary General of the UN making anti-Israel comments as well and laying blame for what's happening in Gaza at the feet of the world's one and only Jewish state.
I'm deeply concerned. After the 7th of October, the anti-Semitism event rise by more than 1,000%, which means 10 times more as comparison before the 7th of October. And I would like to ask, who is supporting Hamas? Who is supporting of kidnapping elderly people above the age of 80, entire family, slaughtering people in Saturday morning when they just wake up in the weekend? As Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, said, they are not a freedom fighter. They are the vicious terrorists.
Minister, let's broaden out a bit. We're talking about the nations of the world, and you're obviously Israel's top diplomat and talking to diplomats in other countries. The Iranian regime, just so people know and our viewers know, lay out for us what a destructive role Iran's regime is playing in this conflict and in the region in general. Could you elaborate on that just a bit, how the head of the snake is really in Tehran, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, the head of all of this resides in Tehran in the form of the Iranian regime?
You describe it well. They are the head of the snake. We attack from our southern border by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. We attacked in our northern border by Hezbollah, and also from a distant country from Yemen by the Houthis. And all of them connecting to Iran. Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, the IRGC, all of them are financed by Iran. Iran is the worldwide #1 who finances global terror in the world. His goal is to prevent the peace and prosperity in our region. This is the goal of Iran, to increase the escalation in our region.
Minister Cohen, thank you so much for joining us. We know how busy you are, especially right now. Last question. Do you have a message for everyone watching right now, for the millions upon millions in America, evangelical Christians around the world, our TBN viewers? Any message in particular you'd like to personally deliver to our audience right now?
First, I would like to thank for all the friends of Israel, to all the Christians which supporting Israel, the Jewish people here in the Holy Land. And I would like to ask all of you, when you are going to sleep, think about the babies that right now in captive, and put a slogan in your social media which asks for one thing: bring them home. Bring them home.
Mr. Cohen, we can't thank you enough for joining us. Thanks for this powerful message, for your insights. And by the way, we should mention the Israel Defense Forces right now under extremely difficult and trying circumstances, fighting in Gaza, fighting tooth and nail against Hamas terrorists. And the fact that there are hostages in Gaza makes their job that much more challenging. Minister, thanks so much for your thoughts. We hope to see you again soon in Israel under better circumstances. God bless.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thanks again. Minister Eli Cohen, Israel's top diplomat. Great to have his insights here, folks, and to get the on-the-ground inside story of the advocacy in Israel's government for the hostages right now. We need to be advocates here in the United States and around the world, wherever you're watching from right now. But of course, it really starts with Israel and what they are doing on the ground. And Abion knows that very well, both sides of the equation. She was originally from the United States. She moved to Israel, made Aliyah about 8 years ago. She's had an incredible stay in the world's one and only Jewish state, but October 7th changed things forever and changed things dramatically. Abby lost family members. She had others who were taken and are still in captivity. Abby, thanks so much for joining us. we can't thank you enough, actually, because I know it's extremely difficult to even talk about the horrors of October 7th and the personal impact it's had on you. Tell us first about your loved ones, the ones who were lost and the ones who were taken and are still in captivity right now in Gaza.
Thank you for having me. 5 members of my family, as you said: Carmela Dan, who is 80, her granddaughter Noya, who's 13, Sahar, her 16-year-old granddaughter, Erez, who turned 12 in captivity, and their father Ofer were all taken from near Oz on October 7th in the morning. Carmela's father actually moved from the United States to Israel 80, 90 years ago. And since then, she's kind of become the matriarch of our family here. She has had 3 children and 12 grandchildren and had lived on Near Oz for more than 60 years, where she raised her entire family.
Yeah, and Carmela and Noya, Abby, look, as you said, the matriarch, Carmela, Noya was autistic, 12 years old,
Yes.
and you were obviously holding out hope that they would return, but their bodies were found a short time ago. But you still have 3 family members in Gaza right now. Tell us a little bit more about them, and I know that you are holding out hope and praying constantly for their return.
We are. Erez was 11 when he was taken, and he's 12 now. He's the same age as my son. He is a horseback rider and a bike rider, and he plays trumpet, and he loves Legos, and he's funny and emotionally intelligent and has a great smile. His older sister, Sahar, is 16. She's a year away from graduating high school, and like a lot of girls her age, is into music and dancing and TikTok, and she and her older sister, Gaia, are both artists, and they're best friends. And their father, Ofer, is really big in the biking community. He is a carpenter. He is the one who will always make the room break up laughing. And they escaped through their window on October 7th, we know, around 8 in the morning. And on October 8th, we saw a video of Erez in the hands of Hamas. He was kind of being dragged down the road by terrorists at gunpoint. And I think, October 7th was horrifying, but was also, you couldn't make sense of it. And I think seeing that video on the 8th, everything became crystal clear that this was a nightmare.
Yeah, and Abby, I'm so glad you are sharing their personal stories, their personalities, the kind of people they were and are, because I think everyone watching right now needs to have that personal connection. These are our sons and daughters, our grandparents, aunts, uncles. This could be anyone. It could be anyone. And look, you are, you're a U.S. native, and you met with President Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken about the hostages and their plight. Can you share anything that came out of those conversations?
Yes, I had the opportunity to meet both with the president and the Secretary of State, and we had 17 senators that traveled to Israel in a bipartisan delegation. And I think it was really critical for every single one of those people at different levels, because they're clearly responsible for different parts of government, whether it be diplomacy versus, the president, something else. They needed to hear the stories firsthand. They needed to see the photos and the videos. They needed to meet the family members. And they needed to feel the personal connection, as you're saying, to us and to our family members in order to turn that around into diplomacy and law that will condemn Hamas, that will demand the release of the hostages, and that will ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I think, I don't know any American in Israel right now that has felt, we've all felt very proud of the American response. It's been coordinated and supportive, and now we want just to see action. We know this is deeply complex, but we really want to see action.
Yeah, it seems like the people of Israel right now, Abby, are incredibly united in this cause. Look, you lived for years in the United States before you made Aliyah to Israel and moved to Israel. You could go back to the U.S. right now in this very tumultuous, dangerous time in Israel, but you're staying. What does that say as an Israeli, as a Jew living in the world's one and only Jewish state? Talk more about that, why it is so meaningful for you to stay on the ground in Israel and to fight this fight.
We came to Israel. My husband is Israeli. We came to Israel almost a decade ago for family. His immediate family is here, and my extended family is here. And up until the 8th, my father was also here. He'd been living here for 3 years. And so for us, family comes first. And I think you never walk away when you have the opportunity to fight and support them. I think in the subsequent weeks since October 7th, you've seen massive anti-Semitism, not just on campus in the United States, but globally. And I think when Biden said it, that if the state of Israel doesn't exist, Jews everywhere are not safe, that hits home harder in the last 30 days than I think it ever has. And it feels even more imperative to fight for the safety and security of the state of Israel.
Abby, we are standing shoulder to shoulder here with you at TBN. I want you to know we will never forget. Is there any message you have for our viewers around the world right now? What do you want to share?
I am so grateful for the prayers. I'm so grateful to your network for talking about this, because it's 30 days later and there are things that are happening around the world and there are things that are happening here that are taking over the hostage story. But you can call your elected official, you can write them, and you can talk about this. You can make sure that the 241 souls that are being held against their will in Gaza are not left there or forgotten. Say their names, share their stories, and help us bring them home.
Abby, thank you so much. Thank you for everything you're doing right now. We are with you. We are praying with you. And when you have that incredible reunion with your loved ones, we're going to have you back to celebrate with you here on TBN. Abby, God bless.
I look forward to it.
Yes, hang in there. We'll see you again
Thank
soon.
you.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, folks, as we wrap this very special edition of Israel Under Fire, and what you've just seen, if you're like me, you're probably feeling a lot of different emotions right now: sadness, outrage, anger, grief, mourning. I'm being hit with all of it as I'm sitting here interviewing these wonderful people in Israel, and it's not easy, no doubt, but it is necessary, and it may not have been easy for you to hear in some cases, but again, very, very necessary. I said it earlier, I'll say it again now. This was the most important show I have ever hosted for TBN. I've hosted a lot of them, so that's saying something, but this program in particular was for such a time as this, and no one else is really doing anything like this in the mainstream media. That's why you're watching TBN right now. I want to leave you with two stories of encouragement from the Bible that took place, yes, in the land of Israel. I've been talking throughout this program about miraculous hostage rescues. I said at the top, God's arm is not too short. He's still on the throne. He's still in control. So I want to leave you with this. Number one, Genesis 14 recounts the story of how Abraham, who was then still known as Abram, took a group of 318 men. Now, his nephew Lot was taken hostage by pagan Canaanite kings. And Abraham and 318 men went and pursued those kings. They fought them and they rescued the hostages. They won an incredible victory. Lot was freed. He was reunited with his family. So that's your first biblical precedent for miraculous hostage rescues in the Bible and in the land of Israel. And then there's the story of King David and his men that's laid out in 1 Samuel. They returned from a campaign only to find that their wives, their children, and all of their goods have been taken captive by the Amalekites. Now, David cried out to God, and God told him to pursue. So he and his men pursued the Amalekites, overtook them, and were reunited with their wives and children. Both of these biblical hostage rescue stories seemed completely improbable until God stepped in. And as the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces are fighting Hamas house to house right now in Gaza and preparing to even venture into those terror tunnels and find the hostages, we're praying for a modern-day rescue miracle that will echo throughout the ages. By the way, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he will not agree to a ceasefire unless all 240 hostages are freed. As world pressure increases on Israel to let up before the job is finished, we need to continue to raise our voices and stand with Israel and the hostages now more than ever. Because as anti-Semitism explodes throughout the world, it's becoming increasingly clear that if the body of Christ doesn't step up and shine a light in the growing darkness, then no one else will. Thanks for watching, and God bless.